Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Emma Uman, and I am the program manager for the 100,000 Opportunities Initiative demonstration cities with the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions. And I have the privilege of introducing this fantastic panel on social enterprise. I'm going to be very, very brief because I want to turn it over to these experts and leaders to share with all of you. But I wanted to begin by just saying three things that make me especially excited about this panel. The first is that in the 100,000 Opportunities Initiative demonstration cities, I'm going to try to be brief, but won't say that a lot. We think a lot about training and preparing young people for employment, and I would say that social enterprises in particular do a fantastic job of preparing young people and all the constituents that they serve for work because they have the direct experience of receiving preparation in a business. And there are so many examples across the country. You'll hear from a few of them today. The second reason, yesterday Monique and I led the site visit to State Street Corporation and Year Up Quincy, and as our group was hearing about this fantastic partnership, inevitably the question of financing came up. And so the second reason I'm so excited about this panel is because I know we all think a lot about the financing and sustainability of our work, and social enterprise, I think, also is an answer to that question. And the third piece is around community development. Our work, as I mentioned, in the 100K demonstration cities and more broadly in the OYIF is about transforming young people's lives and transforming communities. And we heard Governor Patrick this morning say that in a lot of ways we've let business off the hook. I would say that's changing. This next generation of young people cares a lot about how their businesses engage in the communities where they live. And I believe that social enterprises are leading the way and showing that you can have business value and community impact. And so without further ado, I am so excited to transition to Danielle Kompis and this fantastic panel. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. It's on, yeah, great. Thank you, Emma. I think she just took over you just said my introductory comments, and it is a great panel. My name is Danielle Kompis, and I'm a national director with the Bank of America Charitable Foundation. And it is really a pleasure. I consider two of these lovely ladies really dear friends who we've been working with them for a long time. I don't want to say how long, but my boss, Carrie Sullivan, who is the president of the Charitable Foundation, based in Boston, would be sitting here today. She said to me, "Oh, those are my people. I wish I could be there." And she's been, for somebody in the room that have worked with her or know her, she's a steadfast advocate for this work, particularly in education, workforce development, and how we can work with partners like REDF, like Year Up and ROCA on moving youth, particularly youth, up the economic continuum. And so I just say that because I want to give a nod to Carrie, and hopefully I won't embarrass her too much. It's really a pleasure. At Bank of America, we look at economic mobility and recognize it as the lack of it, actually, as a defining social justice issue of our time. And we think about it in a couple ways through an integrated approach that looks at economic development, workforce development, community development. As I know we've talked about in discussions earlier today, collective impact, clearly those are part of those integrated approaches as you think about what you're doing in your own communities. And then obviously youth organizing. And those are really ways that we talked about it. How do we advance some pathways and advance opportunity youth and those opportunities for opportunity youth. Employment clearly is a way to get youth to those livable wage jobs. And one of the things that we need to consider when we're serving opportunity is sustainability and of our nonprofit partners. And I know all of you, or most of you in this room, think about the revenue generating streams that Emma was referring to, and how those are really essential ingredients to long-term sustainability. Social enterprises, again, as Emma referenced, are generating revenue by using business models outside of traditional fundraising. And while giving opportunity to individuals who have barriers to work and barriers to opportunity to get those jobs. And again, in this context of this conversation, we're talking about opportunity youth. Bank of America looks at social enterprises. We've been investing in social enterprise and the movement for about 20 years as well. But the evolution of where we were 20 years ago, Sean, you and I talked about this in terms of it was an idea born 20 years ago and to where we're at today. It is continuing to evolve, and folks in the room probably are thinking about how do I start a social enterprise? What does that mean? What does that look like? And on the panel today is a community, experts and leaders in the field that are looking at social enterprises and how we use them and leverage them to advance social impact. And you'll hear from a few different models. We have Roka, who's based in Boston, working with youth and individuals with multiple barriers. We have Sean from Europe working with high school youth that have some barriers and high school diplomas. And then Redef, Natalie here, thank you, Natalie, for being here, who had a fun Uber experience on her way, represents Redef, which is a national organization led by Carla Javits, who, if you've heard of Carla Javits, she's a trailblazer in her own right, and has been looking at social enterprises for the last 10, 15 years, I think. Started in California, and about 2 years ago launched a national portfolio, of which Roka is a beneficiary of those national investments. So as I mentioned, you will see that each model is highly customized based on the population they serve and the employment, the youth that they work with. It could be, again, as I mentioned, high school youth, but Molly's predominant population is those out of the justice system. And so those are different barriers that they're working with. And you have folks that are formerly incarcerated or just coming out of prison and transitioning to work that have different challenges to traditional workforce programs. So again, the goal of this session is to just demonstrate how social enterprises can serve opportunity youth through a variety of models, discuss best practices for developing a social enterprise, and if your organization isn't ready to develop a social enterprise, discuss potential revenue generation opportunities. With that, I introduced our esteemed panelists. Again, longtime partners with the bank, but I'll formally introduce Molly Baldwin is the founder and CEO of Roka, as I mentioned, located here in Boston. Sean Bowen is the principal for Europe and Grads for Life. And Europe is what we term today as a revenue-generating program that has a social impact and serves youth who have high school diplomas and fewer barriers to success. And then Natalie Wilson with Redef, investing in social enterprises across the country. I'm going to start with Molly, and I know Emma mentioned the Europe site visit yesterday, but I heard an extraordinary site visit at Roka as well, and so folks came back with amazing stories about the organization. When we first met Molly, she showed me this one-page paper, said this is where traditional organizations are working, and I'm working with the youth over here, and I was overwhelmed. So I honor Molly. I think she's a trailblazer, working in doing some incredible work, and I know it's been a journey. So can you tell us about your organization and where it is today? Talk about the youth that you serve and the programs you've designed and worked on to meet the needs and looking at social enterprises.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction. And thank you all for coming today. It's a privilege to meet you, and I feel very lucky to be with these three other women. They're awesome. Just to share a few thoughts, we are very fortunate to work with young people across the state of Massachusetts and young mothers in the Chelsea, East Boston, Revere, Everett area. Our focus is with young people who are not only high risk because of their behavior, young men because of criminal behavior, but also are not ready, willing, and able to participate in a regular program or training or go to school or go to work. So if they could go to Europe, I think we've had 3 people over the years go to Europe. We just think it's awesome. We don't even care if they're happy. We're just so glad they went to Europe and finished. They're like, don't you care how we are? We're like, no. Are you still working? You know, if you can go to Youth Build, phenomenal organizations, and I'm sure some of you represent a number of others. We're thrilled. All the people in Red F, you know, the portfolio is just astonishing. And our area really is these young people who are not ready, willing, or able. And we've built a sort of long-term, we call it relentless outreach, and kind of short speak, it's stalking kids. Outreach, we use relationships as a key vehicle for change, and really do a lot of sort of repetitive things with young people, behavioral health. But we know that you can't succeed without work. And if you're not working, life will not be good, either quickly or slowly, but it's not gonna happen because you need money to live. And because young people, if they were ready to work or ready to go to a training program, they wouldn't come to Roca. It starts to be interesting. Well, how do you do this? So we've tried a few things, but our most effective thing is what we call an embedded social enterprise, which is work crews. It's cleaning, painting, maintenance, nothing very exciting. We have basic work and advanced work when you're doing a little bit better. And most importantly, we run work crews that are highly supervised, but most importantly, we've built a relapse in. So young people receive minimum wage. The best practice for social enterprises in transitional employment is real pay for real work. They are expected to put 1 day in around education and behavioral health and training. They do not get paid for that. But even though the minimum wage has gone up, we think you ought to put in 60 days in a row before we, I don't know, place you in a different job or some other place. And our little friends tend to take 15 to 18 months to get 60 days in a row. Some of them do not even do that. And they can lose their job at Roca, and then they go through a rehire process. They average 5 to 7 rehires. And it's really about the soft skills. Can you show up to work? Can you follow instructions? Can you not tell people to F off? Can you not wander off at lunch? Can you get through the day and work with your team? And it is really one of the most important jobs at Roca. And unfortunately, these young people, awesome that they are, do not have work skills. And so it's really about a real life classroom to have them practice that. One of the reasons, there are a couple things around how we designed it that are important. And we once ran a taco cart that was kind of fun. We did a catering business, which did okay, then it was horrible, then it was great, and then we went out on a high note because we don't have the skills to do catering business. We have relational skills, and we have the ability to work with young people over a long period of time, even if they don't do well. So all the work is fairly low level because, again, it's really designed to work on these social skills. And we embedded it, A, because we didn't need to create a separate entity, and B, it wasn't going to work so well. There's some great transitional employment programs, for example, for people who are functioning a little higher. They can do higher level jobs. You can have smaller teams. You can have more sophisticated work. There's lots of places that do individual placement, and we couldn't quite imagine, we'll go to the local grocery store and we'd like 10 slots. We'll have some crew supervisors wandering around. We can't really tell you the same kids coming every day, but we'll fill the slots mostly. And so that's why it became important that we ran the enterprise, and so that the vehicle of a social enterprise is absolutely critical to help this young group get the skills they need. We've learned over time, it's a lot better if they get 60 days in a row. We use data, we're kind of data nuts, we use it all day long. We track young people, we track staff, we do pattern analysis, and we benchmark. We used to think, okay, you have to put in, 60 days no matter what, and no matter how long it takes. Well, we should have found after 18 months, if you couldn't put 60 days in, young people weren't only relapsing, they were regressing, because why would I go somewhere else? Because she'll rehire me anyway. And so we kind of learned we couldn't do that, so we created a rapid employment component that has multiple rehires and multiple efforts of job placement. And we use it to learn a lot, but mostly to give young people the skills because they really don't know. They can get there. The young men, because of course, all the young men, have felons and are assessed as high-risk offenders, have lots of issues, so the work has to be designed for that. The young mothers have less criminal issues, so we have a little more flexibility. But so the key has been that the social enterprise is just a critical vehicle to give young people real-life, hands-on practice to learn. And we've seen over time, even if they don't graduate, at some point it kicks in. And so I think that's really the advantage of it.
So can you talk about the revenue generation part of the social enterprise? And I'm curious and the audience is probably curious, on how long does it take to get that positive revenue side of the house before you sit there and go, I know you as a mission,
Right.
a purpose, mission-driven organization, you're not going to do that, but there's got to be times where you said, we can't do this, it's not going to sustain itself.
Right, so we did this taco business when we were a little bit different. That was it was kind of tacos unidos, so it was great. It had a taco cart, incredibly labor intensive. We had to underwrite almost all of it. It was ridiculous, but it was good. And then we moved into catering because we thought we might have some more jobs. Well, Roga's not a catering business. We're not into sales at that level. It didn't have enough staffing opportunities for young people, and we had to hire a pretty high-level lead person to do the catering. So economically, we generated a little revenue, didn't do well at all, so we really gave up on that. But we made sure we went out on a high note, because there's a point where we weren't. The thing about the work crews is there are two things. The basic level, which is entry level, our ideal is that the crew, we sell work crews, that the costs cover young people and crew supervisors. And then the advanced transitional employment to higher level employment, young people are more ready. That actually pays for itself, the way we structure that. On a good year, we can get 67 to 70% of the basic work crews covered. On a bad year, we didn't do so well. And we have to the economy's changed so much that when we thought we were onto a path with the changes in the economy, it's a change. So you really have to work on that. I think a couple things are some painful lessons, and Natalie knows this better than I do. One is, what is the right vehicle for the young people you serve? So you don't want to be in a business that doesn't match the young people, where the catering just didn't, match what we do. Two is, I think you want to stick to your core competencies, like what are you good at? So if you're really good at creating social enterprises and have sort of a higher level participant, then you can generate more opportunities in sales. We're really good at relationships and dragging around with young people. So we really moved our social enterprise into that field. And I think you really want to be honest and forthright about it, because otherwise you could really cause a huge amount of harm to your organization. So I think that's really critical. And then you have to have the right people to coach young people, right? And you have to accommodate kind of what's going on with young people.
Great, thanks, Molly.
Thank you.
Sean, as I mentioned, we talked a little bit about social enterprise, and you were here when it was born and how it's evolved. And Europe is not a traditional social enterprise, but you actually have created a demand for youth employment and have generated revenue through that model. So can you talk to us a little bit about the workforce, or the workplace model that you have? And
Sure. Thank you. I just want to echo Molly's appreciation for these three great women, and also for the opportunity to be with all of you today. So I'm actually here representing both Year Up, which probably most of you know about, and I'm also here representing something called the Grads of Life, which is a campaign and now actually a burgeoning entity that we've created that's really working at the systemic level to change perception about who's talented in this country, which is a big issue as we think about opportunity youth as it relates to the talent that our employers need across the country. And that sort of issue and problem was really at the founding idea behind Year Up, which was that there was a marketplace in terms of employment that really wasn't working for many people, and in particular, the population that we've all helped rebrand as opportunity youth, that used to be called many things, including quote unquote disconnected youth, as if somehow they had personally chosen to disconnect. And so Europe began about 17 years ago, and the idea conceptually was that we could, with the appropriate support, training, and education, both around technical skills and what some people call soft skills or people skills or professional skills, and we call the hard and harder skills that Molly spoke to. We would be able to support these young people in having an opportunity, a contextualized learning opportunity to intern in blue chip Fortune 1000 companies in entry level, what are now thought of as middle skill jobs. And that was definitely a boondoggle guess way back 17 years ago when the first 22 students and 22 relationships that our founder and CEO Gerald had essentially made a bet on this idea. What's proved to be true is, of course, talent is equally distributed across the globe, I would argue, and opportunity is not. And what it means to ensure that everybody has a shot at the game and provide them with the support they need is really fundamentally what we're about. We have found in our work with employers over these many years that there are a lot of barriers, some real and some structured through a set of ideas that really came from a lot of bias, or really race and class bias and other bias around who's talented and what talent looks like, and a whole set of proxies for assessing talent and bringing talent into organizations, which arguably many of us in our own organizations do as well. And we've been at cracking that, being a hack to that problem and that change. I would say that my own experience, having been part of one of the brain trusts that thought about how to use the language and create the language of social enterprise way back in the day, which is definitely dating me, is that it really broadly meant that there were issues and people that were interested in working on social challenges, which historically in the US was called the nonprofit sector, and that there were potentially some ideas from quote unquote business that would bring some rigor and discipline to those social problems, and that's where the language came about. It's come to mean many different things, including this idea of revenue. So I just wanted to name the fact that when we say social enterprise, people mean many different things by that, and there may be, even in this room, some ongoing dialogue around what we're talking about. Part of Back to Europe, what was baked into the original model was this idea that the employers actually had a stake in the talent they were going to invest in, and they should make a financial contribution to have access to the talent. And that financial model, which makes up about 50% of the revenue of the organization, way back when it was a $200,000 budget, and up now where it's about a $140 million budget, continues to be true. So 50% of our revenue, a little over 50%, comes from the employer partners who make a contribution to the organization to have access to the talent. And in a way, that's an earned revenue stream. As our programmatic model and direct services evolved, the sort of current and future growth is an adaptation of our original model, which essentially is using the infrastructure and capacity of community colleges, which arguably educate most people in the US to the degree to which they get formal education in a post-secondary institution, and certainly the bulk of opportunity youth. And essentially figure out if we could bring Europe into a community college context. And that had a whole set of benefits to it, in addition to the fact that we were able to lower our cost per successful outcome by about 40% by using the talented faculty within an institution and some of the administrative infrastructure, including, in some cases, admissions. Community colleges, which number about 1,200 in the country, are not a system. I would use system in quotes, in the sense that education is governed at the state level, and every single one of those institutions is different. And so, yet we're experimenting now in 14 different markets around the US with that model. And the way the finances and economics of that revenue work is that once we get up and running and have essentially 2 learning communities operating within a community college, the revenue that comes in from the employer partners actually covers the cost of running the program. So we've essentially figured that out for that program model. I wanted to give one other analog, though, as it relates to the Grads of Life effort, which started out as this national perception change campaign aimed at employers to help them continue to change their view of who's talented and broaden their view to be as broad as many of us in the room, which really, again, was a sort of a bet and a guess in partnership with the Ad Council. And was timely, as sometimes, serendipity and mistakes can happen, in that we were able to really both step into something that we and many others in the room here helped to create, about really figuring out that if we could catalyze employer demand for opportunity youth, we could really potentially have something going to create more opportunities for young people to get into work, because work is central to sustaining oneself and those that you have responsibility for, as Molly talked about. And that campaign, financed initially internally with a handful of very progressive, fabulous funder partners, was a very modest investment, and it's already garnered $78 million worth of in-kind advertising. So again, it's completely eclipsed its initial investment, and it's another way to, in-kind, in this case, ad time for both radio and TV and billboards is another way to think about when we think about social enterprise and how to make change. So I wanted to give that as another example.
That's great, thank you. And you talked about, in terms of the last 17 years, 14 communities, how do you actually identify partnerships and create the demand in the marketplace for jobs and for youth employment? I mean, what type of organizations are you looking at, whether it's the employer? I consider Bank of America as an employer of some of your
fabulous employer partner.
So, yeah, but how does their staff go about doing it?
Yeah, so we essentially have a sales team that's I would say to the competencies that we've developed over time, and arguably were sort of innate when we started. We're multilingual, so we speak young adult and we speak employer, and we're actually a translator across those two worlds, essentially helping people see that we're all the same and that we need each other. And in the early days, and this continues to be true today, we were really listening. In the early days, it was sort of like, would you be willing to try this? It's become essentially a much more sophisticated solution selling where we're listening to, we know a fair amount, and we're keeping up on the market data around middle skill jobs and pain points in organizations, and listening to the challenges that employers have about the jobs where they're having either trouble filling them or high turnover rates or a handful of other things that mean they're having a challenge with a part of their pipeline. And essentially saying there's a population that you've heretofore looked away from and or overlooked and or don't see. And we would love to actually introduce you to that population and have that, we think, based on our experience, they would be a terrific fit for what you need to get done. And then we work with partners, employer partners often, to be adjusting what we're doing in the classroom, 6 months in the classroom in advance of going on internship, to ensure that folks are trained up for what they're going to encounter. Although the internship component, which is the second 6 months, is the ongoing learning experience that's contextualized within an employer context as opposed to in the classroom with other peers. That's an ongoing and iterative thing. So like 5 years ago, cybersecurity wasn't even something we were doing. It's now, painfully, as you all intimately probably know and are living, a really big business. And there is barely a company and organization out there that isn't having to think about what they're doing as it relates to cybersecurity concerns and threats. And so that's a booming area, and where a lot of employers. But we're often adapting, and then we'll do a lot of peer-to-peer among employers, which Bank of America has been a great partner in, convening a bunch of, in your cases, financial services partners with others to be talking about what we could be doing across those within an industry and or within a region. But the idea is that we're listening to what the employers actually need, helping them see and have access to a population that they've heretofore not seen, and then through trial and error working on, because arguably the Bank of America is a slightly different culture than, for instance, Google or MIT, all three of whom are employer partners, to ensure that we've got not just the technical and harder skills right, but we've also got the culture right in terms of our young people being successful. And that's also really helping employers who, as an old person in the room, I'll say, have bias around younger generations in general, never mind people who they perceive as not being like them. And so it's really also providing support to employers to be thoughtful about what it means to bring young people, and in particular opportunity youth, into your organization and support their success. There's a whole set of things around that, which include everything from ongoing support for post-secondary credentialing and degree attainment. You all will know this deeply, but it was surprising for many folks who had, in many employers who have had really terrific investment in their employees, that the idea of a tuition reimbursement program, while a great benefit per se, makes absolutely no sense for a young person and certainly for an opportunity youth, because the idea of being able to put up front the money you would need to pay for a course or several is just an impossible construct financially. So figuring out and helping them think about how to put tuition first with some accountability around what you would be doing in that coursework, and potentially, the kind of grades you needed to be getting to continue to sustain that kind of an investment from your employer. It's a whole different pivot in a way for employers to be adaptable as it related to continuing to invest in this talent. So those are a couple of thoughts.
Thanks. Natalie, Roca, Europe, two great, amazing organizations that have been out there doing this amazing work, helping youth. How does, for the audience in the room, Red F is investing in social enterprises. What do you think about, or what do you look at in terms of why is this a good social enterprise? Should we spend the money? Should we invest? And what are the types of things that you're looking at when you think about those investments?
So just to echo everyone, I wanted to say thank you for having me here. I'm definitely humbled to be in the room with these great women, and wouldn't consider myself an expert. I think I'm standing in here for Carla on behalf of Red F, but just to speak to what we look at when we think of social enterprise, one of the biggest things for us is the program fit. So we're really focused on social enterprises that are employing people with barriers to employment, as we identify them. And a lot of the social enterprises we invest in are really working with people who have multiple barriers to employment, whether it be homelessness, former incarceration. I work with some groups in Chicago, for example, who employ young mothers that are opportunity youth that also have the challenge of being parents. So it's across a broad spectrum, but we're just really focused on barriers that are preventing them from entering or returning to the workforce. The other piece that we'll look at is trying to look at the enterprise itself. So a lot of us have kind of like an MBA background, and we're interested in breaking out both the business and the social costs of a social enterprise and saying, if we were to just look at the business costs, is this a profitable business? And if not, is it something that we can help turn that around? And that's what we spend a lot of our time focusing on with some of our groups. And we're also interested in outcomes, because it's not just about employment, it's about what are they doing after the employment? Are they going on to successful permanent employment? Are they staying there? What does their trajectory look like over time? Are they earning more money and more income than they would have otherwise? So I'd say those are the biggest factors.
And just to bring back to Roca, you've been a portfolio member for how many?
About a year, a little over a year.
A little over a year. How is that, what Red F brings to the table, help lift up your work over the last year?
Awesome in lots of ways. I mean, it's a little like the good housekeeping seal of approval. If you get connected to Red F, it's sort of like, oh my gosh. There's a huge amount of expertise. There's obviously, they're providing some financial support during some critical shifts and changes and helping us think about our business development. But there's a set of tools that different organizations and enterprises use. There are places where people have been very successful in certain areas, so the peer learning is really good. And the quality of the team at Red F is very high, so it sort of sets the bar really high. So it's a pretty extraordinary opportunity for us.
We did not pay her to say that.
We've been waiting for years, by the way, to work with Red F. For years, it was only California, and so we're like both honored and thrilled. So.
And what does it take to bring the organizations you're looking at to scale? I mean, in the work that you're doing, because you, as you mentioned, you're a staff that's, Red F is not only investing dollars, but technical assistance, capacity, business acumen. What does it take to actually take an organization and bring it to scale out of the portfolio that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Roca, they're an organization that we're honored to have you in the portfolio, and I think they tend to be one of the organizations who shares learning this direction, but we do work with a lot of smaller social enterprises who haven't been around for as long and are really kind of just learning the way and still trying to figure out what is the right model to serve the youth or the people that we're working with. So I think where we kind of hone in and focus on, especially with recently, I guess about a year ago, we expanded nationally, so it's been a pretty big scale up for us as well. So we're trying to make sure we're engaging in, not just with the social enterprise, but with the whole ecosystem and looking locally at different organizations that they can interact with, from referral partners to outside employment as well, and getting everybody on board and at the table for those conversations. We will,
like the accelerators?
yes, so we have accelerator so that's kind of separate from the portfolio, but with our portfolio, we're really focused on addressing any challenges that they're currently facing. So some groups are exploring different models for social enterprise, for example, so we would kind of approach it with a feasibility and say, is this serving your population? How many people are you able to employ? I think when we hear about, examples of the taco tracker, things like that, we would go in and assess, okay, if it's employing 5 people and not quite bringing in the revenues that you're looking to, and unfortunately it's not always that simple, then maybe this is a no-go. But kind of assessing a lot of different decisions and helping come up with strategy around.
And I think the question for all 3 of you, and maybe you answer the question in terms of launching a social enterprise, you talked about some of the challenges. You've probably seen some challenges faced. If we have folks in the room that are in their local communities, working with youth, thinking about a social enterprise, what are the things you would share with them in terms of the go, no-go, or working with employers in the communities to identify and have those peer-to-peer conversations and building a platform for youth? What would be your advice?
I think starting with the focus on who you're the youth, and the employment opportunities and the skills that you're looking to develop in them, but then also understanding where they're at. So saying, if you wanted this to be the transitional employment period where they're kind of learning, working through a social enterprise, you have to understand what their current skills are and then you can build upon. And then where you want them, what's their trajectory? What is their pathway? What do they do after the social enterprise? Kind of building towards that. So if it's catering, what are the opportunities within food service? Does this make sense should we focus on manufacturing and have a social enterprise? Because that's where, full-time job opportunities are. And engaging with partners along the way so that you know that there are employment opportunities once they leave the social enterprise.
Molly?
I think I totally agree with what you just shared, and I guess I would say, enterprise is fundamentally an entrepreneurial adventure, and I think you heard probably, from each of the 3 of us, but certainly these 2, that there's a learning in public reality to trying something new, because arguably we are continuing to make it up as we go along and evolve what we're up to. And so I think there is something to what are we good at, what are we innately good at, and to the degree to which there are things we're going to need to be good at in order to be effective in starting something new. Being kind of not too rose-colored glasses-y about that and getting some good outside of yourselves feedback about who you want to partner with and what the complementarity around skills, particularly risk, most importantly to those that we're working with and we serve, and also obviously in terms of partnerships, because resiliency of the learning in the community that you're operating in is going to be critical, because as Molly described so carefully, for many young people, we're trying to enable them to step fully into their potential, and wherever they're starting, which will be different for every young person and different for different populations of OI, and arguably different across the country in different places, we got to start there. And there may, depending on, it may be a long road. I mean, I'm still figuring it out, and I'm in my 50s, right? So we know that it's not like there's a silver bullet or there's something quick about that. So I think there's something about really being clear among who's on our team. The other is just within the communities that you're operating, which I know is part and parcel of this network and what people have been trying to figure out, is what's already going on, and let's not duplicate what's going on. Are there gaps, and how can we knit things together? So one of the things, the language I use around this is, in all of our communities, what we want is our communities to be less holy, and I don't mean that in religious terms. I mean, we don't want there to be holes that people can step into and get lost in. We want to have there to be very tight fabric. And not one way, obviously. And so the assessment, I think, around the opportunities, and if you think about it from the employment standpoint, is where are the gaps, and we're in a really interesting place in that we have pretty tight labor economics right now, and a lot of real and perceived concern among employers that they, quote, can't find the talent that they need. Arguably, they're not looking in the right places, and or we're not doing a good enough job in ensuring people are ready to work or have the employability skills they need. But that's massive opportunity, arguably for as long as this, heyday of economic sustainability continues. And so I think really listening there and making sure the match is right and that there's support for the learning on both sides. Employers in our experience, coming to work with OY, it's a new adventure, and they have a whole set of ideas about the risks there, which arguably are the same risks with any employees for the most part, and helping them be comfortable with the learning they're going to need to do and supporting their ongoing success and building champions so they can proselytize within organization or across organizations is really key too.
A couple things, but just before I go forward, I just want to acknowledge Dorothy Stoneman. I just feel like I'm sitting here looking at you. She's one of the heroes in this work and clearly done some of the best work in the country youth build. So what a privilege. I just had to say that since I'm staring right at her. It's nice to see you. Just to add a couple things, I do want to underscore, I think you need to be really realistic. Can your organization handle what you're looking at? If you can get somebody else to do it, get them to do it. We couldn't find a supermarket that was willing to, I don't know, have 15 different kids in the same job slot in 2 weeks. And we got stuck. And you just have to be very realistic about that. Who are the young people you're serving? What's the trajectory? And what's the capacity of the organization? For us, there's another risk factor. So one of our pretty great contract with this housing authority, all supposed to be outside work. Never in an apartment where anybody lives. So somebody wanted help in an apartment where somebody lived. The supervisor said yes without checking. So a young person, it was an older woman in her 80s, stole a piece of jewelry and stole an iPad. So it sent the housing authority off the Richter scale, the mayor off the Richter scale, the police department furious, here, we trusted you, we believe in you. Like, well, first of all, like, if felony is the price of entry, and we know you can't keep a job, we should not be in any place where people live. We just can't be. So I tell, somebody was joking, they were visiting, they said, I can't believe, like, staff lose their phones, they're stolen all the time, and they think it's funny. Well, it's like, because you shouldn't have left it there. I mean, it's what gets you in the door, right? And that doesn't mean people can't change and become their brilliant selves. They can, but you have to set this up. And you have to have the bandwidth organizationally to work through this. So I think it's really important. And you don't want to create something like there'll be these great ideas. We meet incredible people. I read the Red F stuff, or even, Youth Build incredible work. I'm like jealous, like, oh, that'd be cool to do some of that. It's just not what we're gonna do. So you really want to be realistic, because then you can't really help people move along what they need to do. And I think all the young people we serve can get there. They are extraordinary, and they can just be brilliant. They just don't happen to be at that point in their life. And so we have to be really careful to match that. And I can't stress enough the organizational bandwidth. If you find yourself where you have to create an entire new competency in order to do it, and you're taking yourself way out of your wheelhouse, it literally can collapse an organization. You just have to be really careful about that. So if you know somebody else, go beg them, right, to do that.
Great, thanks. No, that's reality, right? Before I turn it over to Q&A, because I'm hoping some folks in the room have questions as you think about your community and what opportunities there might be. And obviously, this is the group that could answer those questions. I wanted to introduce Shanice Turner in front, who is a Year Up alum. So Shanice, if you can stand up, I think we have a mic for you. And also an OYIF part of the network, the leadership network. And I'd love Shanice to share with us her experience at Year Up. What are you doing now, and how have some of the things, or probably most of the things, through your experience at Year Up, how are you applying that today? And I know that's a lot, so I'm sorry, Shanice.
It's okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Shanice, and I'm a Class 8 Year Up Atlanta alum. Now, I had an opportunity to sit down and speak to Gerald yesterday, who is the CEO of Year Up. And it's just been a great time for him to make a table for me, but also to put me on his schedule. Now, my experiences with Europe has been a great one. They taught me things from peer-to-peer relationships, which was said by this panel. They also taught me about how to live as I climb, how they said different things about mentorship, which is really important in any social enterprise relationship. They talked about different things, such as it's important to have a caring adult. When you have a caring adult, it makes a difference in a young adult's life because they have someone who can support them, but also someone who can lift them, who can push them, who can make it a change and a difference. Now, my own experience was I was with more of the quieter students. I didn't go directly into IT though, but I did a great job. I had an internship with the North Highland Company after receiving training in public speaking and project management and different things that they train you. And through North Highland, I ended up at United Way. And with that it was a great experience too, because that taught me the circle that goes around in this type of work in our nation too. So I love Europe for their 3 values that I keep to my heart, which is work hard and have fun, be accountable, and embrace diversity. Now with that, embracing diversity, I've been able to do work with Europe as well because they sponsor me for OYU, which is Opportunity Youth United. And what that means, we are a group of youth, young adults, that do different types of work in rural and metropolitan areas in cities like in Atlanta that I do with United Way. Now, what am I doing now? I am a development manager at a college called Gate City. And with that, it taught me the pleasures of serving. It taught me how I could use my talent to go out into the community and do something, to be something, and that's what's important to me. So we're all here to do this, and I urge you to look at this recommendation because we're all here for social change and social justice. Thank you.
This is one of the Europe alumni stuff.
Thank you so much, Shanice. And it is the Q&A time, and if you have questions for us, and you may have questions for Shanice, so Shanice, don't go too far. So I'll open up for any questions for the panel. I have a question. Oh, sorry, Abby, you have a question.
Yeah, I just have a question. Knowing that social enterprise is not necessarily an option for every organization in the room, Molly, as you mentioned, there's a lot of effort. It's got to be within your core competency. What advice do you have for maybe other revenue streams that may not be fully developing a social enterprise, knowing that we all work with Opportunity Youth that organizations can implement? Any of the panelists would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, again, I think it's a core competency issue. I mean, if you happen to have an organization where you could sell something, I mean, like Big Brother and Big Sister, I think they have a whole used clothing business, but they've been able to separate it, I think, from the core work. So it's not Big Brothers and Big Sisters doing it, but that generates revenue so that it has a separate infrastructure. I think, again, I understand the desire, but I think it's really important to look at your organization and your bandwidth and figure out, do you have something that you can sell or do? There is, there's sort of outcomes-based funding, the whole pay for success initiatives, of which we're a pay for success model, but it's also very complicated and it's very sophisticated. So I think, I just caution reality testing around revenue streaming, and bandwidth is really key, because if you're very good at something, you're better off trying to figure out, if you have to raise money, what's the best way for what you do that you're very good at to raise money, than to get yourself into a bunch of different revenue streams that need entirely different competencies to do. And so it just, it sort of depends. I don't think it's as easy as it sounds sometimes, I think, to be honest. So, sorry. I'm not a painfully honest one today.
I was just going to offer another analog, and I totally agree with what Molly just said, if only it were easy. One of the things that we had the opportunity to do because we saw another business opportunity, which is that Shanice is a fabulous example of someone who went to the year program in Atlanta, she described, and then she was successful in the first half in the learning development phase, and then she was placed on an internship. And what happens in about 30% of the cases is that the employer partner that is hosting that intern wants to hire that young person. And historically what was happening is many of these large companies were essentially bringing in a third-party organization to actually cut that employment deal. And literally the company was spending money on making that hiring happen, taking arguably money out of the pocket of the young person in terms of their future salary and putting money, because they were spending money in this third party. And we said, well, we actually know more than the company and this third party staffing agency about this population of young people and these young people themselves. There's a business opportunity for us to become an expert at that. And so we actually created a separate social benefit corporation called UPRO that's a sister affiliate organization that's currently in its early days but has just started turning a profit in its third year of operation. And we set it up partly to seize the opportunity and make sure the money was going in the pockets of our young people, and because we needed a way to fund our ongoing support of our alumni as they graduated. And we didn't want to add dollars onto the operating model. And so we created this separate enterprise to finance that, and that's now happening. And the first check of profit for this social benefit corporation just went to the Alumni Association in Q4 of 16, which is a great success. But again, it was, and we looked at a lot of models. We thought it should be an employee-owned company. We should have it be a minority business. We went through all these possible models. What would the structure be? How could we set it up so it would fit all these needs? But that was to the expertise, we had to have volunteer support from various people on our board. We didn't want it to take away from the core thing that we were good at, so we set it up on the side as something separate, as an experiment to not distract from the core business. And we've got now 3 years of operating experience, and we're likely to be launching another social benefit corporation as we think about the ecosystem. And again, what's ours to do or what the opportunities we see out there. But again, lots of discipline around saying no, which is really hard when you see all these opportunities and you want to take advantage of them. But I think sobriety and discipline are critical in these, in the wanting to do the right thing, but really saying, is it ours to do?
And our focus really is on social enterprise, but I think just to speak broadly to how, we would consider an alternative staffing agency, just some groups that we invest in have a social enterprise alternative staffing agency. So it's really not about selling something, but you're just working with youth or the individuals and helping them find employment. A lot of opportunities are temp to perm and end up leading to greater success later on.
Thanks. Any other questions from the room? Oh, I have a question. Oh, I was going to ask, and I was going to take the opportunity to ask you guys a question.
Hi, firstly, thank you so much. It's so interesting to hear your different perspectives. My question was for Sean. You talked a little bit about Grads of Life and the kind of energy that's growing around that. I recently launched a nonprofit in New York that's connecting employers with first-generation college graduates of color. And one of the places we're really challenged is getting employers to think differently about their proxies, specifically GPA cutoffs. So I'm wondering where you've seen energy around this, or what ways you've seen organizations push employers to think differently about what they've historically used to measure who's going to be successful.
It's a great, first of all, congratulations on your startup. I know I've been reading about you. It's really nice to see you. I think we're in the midst of a revolution on this right now, which is super exciting, and everybody in the room is part of it. Because I think the way we've historically, arguably in the Western world, and certainly in this country, thought about how we assess what someone knows and what they can do is really old school. We're still using, quote, the paper resume. Imagine that. And we have these assumptions that if you do X, Y will be true. So we still imagine if you get X, Y, Z done, you'll have market labor attachment. Meanwhile, we're having a radical, fast-changing revolution around what's going to constitute work, and how the economy, which is really global, is So I think we're in the midst of kind of creating this. I do think the true north for us has always been what is the problem we're trying to solve? And so if you think about it from an engaged employer standpoint, and I would turn this back over to although we all employ people, this other employer in the room, at the front of the room, to have you answer this question as well, Danielle, but which is what's the pain point that we're the solution to? And because you really want to be speaking into someone's listening, as opposed to trying to get them over to your side. So you got to be listening for what the problems that are top of mind, and then potentially bringing a new solution that they might not have seen and making it easy for them to experiment and try. That's my 2 cents on that. And so I was just in a conversation before coming over here on a particular issue, and in fact, GPA was one of the things we were tackling with a particular employer company. There were a couple other what I call elite biases, and we're not sure we're going to crack the nut on this because the company is so caught up in how it thinks about and it doesn't have a problem really in terms of finding talent, at least at this moment in time. So again, not all things for all people, but really trying to understand and listen before you try to figure out, because I think we're often pitching and selling, and as opposed to listening to be a solution to someone's problem. So that would be my 2 cents. I don't know if that resonates. You're nodding nicely, but I hope it resonates.
Yeah, I think, and Abby, I want to also introduce Abby Hollingsworth, who's with the Bank of America Foundation, and she runs our workforce development program, and she's very close to this conversation as she manages our financial center internship program, which works with high school youth and then a summer youth employment program. And she's close to, we also have a consumer academy program that's just being developed. So again, we as an employer, to Sean's point, have an issue with the pipeline at that entry level and that diverse population, whether it's Spanish speaking, and we actually are entering into a partnership that I can't talk about right now, but really working at the table, creating resources, materials, developing program with a partner that can feed into this pipeline. So it is, to your point, listening, but I don't know, Abby, if you have anything to add about the work that you're doing with the Financial Center Internship Program. Oh. Oh.
I mean, knowing that most of the people in the room are working with Opportunity Youth, looking to get them employed, give them opportunities from an employer perspective, I think just to echo what the panel said, really being demand focused. I mean, we work very closely with our team in HR, as Danielle mentioned. Diversity and inclusion recruiting is a priority for us. There are also a lot of needs that we have as a company that are not taught in colleges, like IT skills, JavaScript, which I don't even know what that is, but I know that we need it as a company, and it's important. Europe helps us with that. Anti-money laundering, they don't teach that in college. Europe helps us with that. What we've really been doing is partnering with nonprofits to say, here are our needs that we cannot fill. Can you meet those needs? And so being demand focused, I think, is really important. What are employers needing and how can you meet those needs? You don't want to go out of scope outside of your core competencies to meet those needs, but seeing where that demand is and making that match, I think, is really critical. And so that's what I'll say as far as advice.
The one other thing I would just add, just as a forthcoming, one of the other things we've been working on with many others for a long time is this idea of what's the business case from an employer standpoint for OY, for Opportunity Youth. And I'm thrilled to give you a little preview that we have a forthcoming, really interesting report coming out, work we've been toiling on with our colleagues at the Harvard Business School's Competitiveness Project and Accenture, essentially looking at the cost of hiring someone with a credential that you don't really need. So the upskilling cost, which is, it turns out, the headline, this report's going to be coming out in July, and we're happy to, there'll be a big splash as it's going out, so it'll be easily accessible, is it's really expensive and it adds no value. So we're working all the time, essentially, and helping employers tell their own stories, which B of A has been great at doing, and many others, about what their own myth busting that they're finding in light of a problem, and then the new adventures that they're trying that are actually changing some of their perceptions about what they actually need. And I think more of that which arguably is part of the work of Grads of Life, and with many colleagues in the room, is a big piece of what we can be doing community by community, company by company, and around this work, so that the new normal shifts.
How many, you had a question? Okay.
My question is that we've been talking about social enterprise as a revenue stream. Can you speak to it as an economic engine for a community?
Let's take that.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess there are a couple, different ways to think about that. Obviously, giving people meaningful opportunities really builds community and is really important because it helps people get the skills they need and feel that they can do things that they never believed they could do before. And that obviously plays back to the community. I sort of think, so this may be answering your question a little, and it may not. I apologize if not. I think nonprofits are part of the community fabric. We sort of tackle a whole bunch of things other people don't. We ideally hire a lot of people from the community. We have a role in the community just because it doesn't happen to be a for-profit business. And I think that that's a really critical piece to the economy and most importantly to the civic life and emotional and spiritual and mental well-being of people. So I sort of think of it from that approach. It may not be the most sophisticated approach, but that's kind of how I sort of think about it.
I think I have a similar opinion on that in terms of like it's providing employment opportunities within a community. My mic fell down. Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I have a similar opinion on that in terms of it's implying employment opportunities within a community, but then also engaging with for-profit businesses and helping them when it comes time for them looking for employment, like connecting them with people who've gone through this experience at a social enterprise and have been kind of prepared and made job ready through that. I've never really thought about it as something that's just about earning revenue for a nonprofit. It's really focused on the youth or whoever is working at the social enterprise. And as I said, we invest along a spectrum. So not just with groups that are employing youth, but.
I think the only thing I would add is just, and Shanice said this saying we have inside, which is lift while you climb for our young people. And that's really thinking about as an ethos of a way of being in your community, which is both the community that you create with your colleagues who go through Europe with you, who are fellow students, the communities that you come from in the town or community that you're living in, the network across the nation of young people that you're joining, and the employment community that you become part of, and all the other communities, and creating the space to create opportunities behind you. So we're seeing this powerfully play out in cities we've been operating, including this one now for 17 years, where we have folks who are supervisors of 6 generations below them of folks building real communities, which also then gets to civic engagement and sort of the power of participating in all sorts of things, including arguably voting, which we're very active in helping our young people as they get footed in their own economic comfort and success of what their responsibility is in the communities that they come from. And enormous, we have an annual meeting now of alums from across the country, and that's one of the big pieces, including the ongoing steps of self-sustaining efforts of first-time house buying, ongoing education, supporting those that you're responsible for, including about 10% of our young people 14% come in with kids, and obviously many have kids. So, and thinking about that as beyond self and survival, but really all that you're coming. And I think I've watched that play out in many places that we're operating in a really powerful way. And I think particularly, as Molly said, beginning to imagine and see what's yours to do that's beyond what you ever imagined, and then fully stepping into that in ways that, for me, as I have the great pleasure of serving witness, or blow my mind. And certainly many, many older people around these young people. And I think that's part of what, you could speak to this, Shanice, better than me, but what we get to serve witness to and watch?
Actually, it was through the work at REDF. Bank of America, we have a division called Support Services, and we actually don't look at ourselves as a, well, we're obviously for-profit, but about 20 years ago, an organization that has about 300 individuals with disabilities. And they actually work on fulfillment, graphic, T-shirts within the company. And it was Carla who said, you know, Bank of America has a social enterprise, and we do. So we've always looked at social enterprise, nonprofit sector as economic engines, but as social enterprises, they're businesses. I sit on the board of the Social Enterprise Alliance, and we have for-profit and nonprofit. And there's also data there on, you know, you can go onto the website in terms of what the economic opportunities are there and how they serve as an engine. So for us, it's not just, it's the triple bottom line as we talk about social enterprise, right? It's good for me, good for you, and then good for the community. And so that's how we view it, not just the economy and the revenue, but it is just part of building strong economies at the local level. How many are either a social enterprise or thinking about going into on this journey? Oh, I mean, I can't see, I'm sorry, I can't see all the way back there. I'm interested as you think about it, is there anyone, after you've learned it, been here for an hour with us, is there anyone that wants to not think about it or go think about it? I mean, it is, and I want to ask this question, and do people have a full understanding of social enterprises? Did you walk in here going, I don't know what it is, or did you walk in going, now I have a clear understanding of the work that it takes? But I do think that, you know, these three individuals who have this rich history and experience, and then I didn't see Dorothy walk in, and Dorothy's in the front. Molly, thank you. You know, it is about how you think about yourselves and your own community, and it sounds like no one wants to go down this journey, but we're hopeful. I'm hopeful that you will think about it and reconsider and look at these opportunities that not just, well, we're going to generate revenue, but it is employing people's lives and employing and helping people with the most barriers to work to find jobs and get livable wage jobs. So I don't know if any parting suggestions or comments for the group in closing?
Again, a privilege to be here. Absolutely worth doing. Just, you know, be awake, be disciplined. You know, everything and anything we can do to help young people be their awesome selves is worth every effort. So, thank you.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. I think one of the, just a parting thought, one of the things when I first started at REDF that someone asked me to think about was, what was my first job? How old was I? And then how did that lead to every job thereafter? And I think we often, you know, forget about that and forget about how important it is to have that first opportunity and for someone to like invest in you and think about you. And I think that's where REDF is really interested in investing in social enterprises that are focused on helping people get sometimes their first job.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for this, for being with us.